How do you take your scraps from this to this? Well, with the Russian join and a steam iron. The Russian join is a technique to join yarn without a knot, creating a strong and smooth join. It's a technique where you thread the yarn through itself, creating a small loop through which you can thread the end of the yarn you want to join it to. I'm using a blunt needle, and sometimes it slides through the yarn pretty easily. Sometimes it's a little bit more fiddly. So you scrunch up the yarn on the needle and then pull the end through the yarn. I threaded through the yarn at least 5 centimeters because the white yarn I wanted to join wasn't very sticky, and I wanted to be able to taper the ends by thinning out the plies. The extra length gave me some wiggle room and some reassurance that it would be a strong join. If you have a loop that's too big, you can pull on the tail before you smooth out the yarn completely. If you're happy, snip off the end and repeat. If you think it looks too bulky, you can do the same, but thin out some of the plies before you smooth out the scrunched up yarn. The burgundy yarn was a bit harder to thread through, and sometimes it helps to roll the yarn between your fingers to open up the plies a little bit. So you leave the yarn scrunched up and use a needle to pull out some of the plies. Then you cut them at a few different lengths before you smooth out the yarn. I think it looks nice, it's just a little bit more work. One of the swatches I had was made up out of a lot of smaller pieces, and I joined them as I frogged. Now, as you can see, there were a lot of kinks in the yarn, but I was able to do the Russian join without much extra fuss. After joining each piece, I wound them into a ball, but I wasn't quite ready because of all the kinks in the yarn. I decided to use a Swift to unwind everything and tie it together so that I could use a steam iron to relax the yarn. It looks so rewarding. I did have to move up the ties because the seam didn't quite penetrate the wool underneath it. If you don't have a steam iron, I'm wondering if you could do the same over a pot of boiling and steamy water. And washing is another option, but I don't want to wait for it to dry. Now I'm using a fancy Swift and ball winder, but you can just as easily ball it by hand and use the back of a chair to unwind the yarn. It does take more time, but with a nice movie or podcast in the background, it can be an enjoyable process. My cake is now ready for a scrappy blanket that I'm planning to knit in the future.